Good morning, and welcome to The Crawl, the show where we break down the future of search, brand authority, and everything else AI is rewriting about digital marketing. I am Tristan Harris, your host, and today we are going to chat with the founder and principal strategist of Growth Minded Strategy, Courtney Henry, on the human role of AI. Courtney Henry is a brand strategist, speaker, and educator who has spent her career turning marketing know-how into real business results. Since founding Growth Minded in 2020, she has helped big brands and small brands build meaningful, profitable relationships with their most valuable customers, clients, and centers of influence. Before that, 14 plus years at Hill Holiday, Tailwind, and Boston University's in-house creative agency put her in the room with Bank of America, Disney, NFL, JP Morgan Chase, Cigna, Planet Fitness, Liberty Mutual, Macy's, Aldi's, and the American Cancer Society, helping each one build a loyal following and drive serious sales. She also brings that expertise beyond the client work, regularly presenting and teaching on brand and marketing strategy to audiences from emerging entrepreneurs to seasoned executives. Courtney holds a BS in Business Administration with a concentration in marketing from Endicott College and an MBA in marketing from Boston University. And when she's not helping her clients reach big, bold business goals, Courtney can be found spending time with her husband and two sons, slaying a Peloton workout, competing in Irish dance competitions, or reading a personal development book because #growth-minded. So with all of that being said, Courtney, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me this morning, Tristan. Really excited to be chatting with you. I think that what we're going to be talking about is super important, and so excited to dive in.
Awesome. And I always ask guests, how does it feel to have, a litany of your accomplishments read out to you at the start of a podcast?
So awkward. So as you were reading it, I was like, he's not done yet. How long, we all have bios, right? And we share them. And I was thinking, wow, I really got to trim that down. But thank you for gutting that out. It's both, wow, there's a lot of miles on these legs, and two, brevity is probably better.
Yeah, it's funny. We've had guests where I've gone through that and they've turned around and been like, actually, I also did this. And you're like, oh, great. And then we've had guests that obviously like kind of wilt under the spotlight a little bit. So I always ask because, I would feel a little self-conscious, I think. But thank you for that feedback. Yeah. So to start us off, can you tell us a little bit about Growth Minded Strategy?
Absolutely. So Growth Minded was founded under the premise that I had worked in agencies my entire life with huge brands. And then when I started my business, I started working with some small and mid-sized brands in addition to the really big brands. And I realized, the challenges that they're having, at the end of the day, every business I worked with was going after the same thing. It was growth in some way. Was it growth in revenue and profit? Was it growth in their team? Was it in their product? And all these different challenges that people were coming to me were focused on how do we grow in a sustainable way? And so my business has really evolved to zero in on not necessarily full service agency where I came from, but the really hard, unflashy work up front of making really difficult decisions about where a business plays, who is our audience, what white space do we own, how can we best reach our customers? So it's helping businesses of any size get really, really clear on who they are and develop the competitive advantage that they need to play in the space that they want to play in and that their customers need them to be in. And so we do that through customer research. We do that through brand and marketing strategy, really helping them understand who are you talking to, and what's the quickest way to meet them where they are.
That's fantastic. And as a marketer myself, there's no quicker way to miss all of your goals than being misaligned on all of those topics. Not really understanding who your audience is, not really understanding what sets you apart. All of that work up front that isn't as glamorous, right? It's not turning around KPIs that are easy to measure or anything like that. But all of that's so incredibly important because otherwise you might be setting off way down the wrong path and spending a lot of resources, labor, capital to not hit
Absolutely.
your goal.
I actually have an example of that. There's a firm that I worked with last year. They're actually based out of Canada. And they are leaders in laneway home building. And they are absolutely in the Vancouver market, which I don't know if anyone who's listening or if you know anything, the Vancouver real estate market is really, really challenging. It's super competitive. So what's happening, it's this whole submarket that's developed is that people are actually building laneway homes on their parents' land because they have a lot and it's impossible to get land and it's
Oh,
impossible to
wow.
buy a place. So long story short, they came to me and they first started saying like our audience is baby boomers or empty nesters. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And we had that conversation for about 6 months. And then we did research. We did a lot of research. We surveyed 900 of their prospects, some of which became clients, some of which didn't. Some never built a laneway, some went with a competitor. We did a ton of one-on-one interviews. And then we did some non brand research, meaning just like general market surveys. And we found out that that was not their audience. They'd been spending hundreds of thousands of
Oh,
dollars on digital marketing. I mean, at their site of construction, that was reaching everyone. That was more general awareness. But we found out that their audience, their message, the channels, everything they were talking about, they thought it was empty nesters. And we were really talking to people aged 35 to 50 who were actually the adult children that were going to be taking care of the aging parents and had younger children and were coming in
wow.
and building this land. And so they were like, wait, we've been doing that for how many years? And we're wondering why things are not working the way they should anymore. And so it was that little tweak that then shifted their entire marketing strategy, omni-channel, but especially their digital marketing strategy. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And that's a thing I've seen in businesses I've stepped into to help build out, as well as, with competitors in the market and things along those lines, is that misalignment is material when it comes to labor costs, when it comes to capital. And it's something that you absolutely should get right out the gate, or you run into an issue where you turn around 6 months later after spending 50 100 grand a month and you're not getting the results that you need.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the topic at hand, which is the human role of AI. So you started Growth Minded in 2020. Since then, we've seen a massive advent in the AI space
Mhm.
across the board, no matter what the discipline is. How has your perspective on AI changed over that time frame?
It is done a complete 180 in that I remember when AI first came about, I remember working with some different colleagues and things, and they were huge into it. They were using it. I remember like people were using AI to like make their slide decks for them. Like that was the extent
Yeah.
of it, right? They were like dabbling in it. And I was like, what is this stuff? And I tend to be someone who I sometimes like to take the long road and the hard road because I feel like as a strategist, I need to work through things. But as I started to dip my toe in it as a user, I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. This is life changing. So I'm actually a huge proponent of AI. What I see happening though as a growth strategist, and what I think a lot of brands are struggling with is that AI is this really powerful tool and people are using it,
Mhm.
but they don't realize that as powerful as the tool is, the inputs that you need to put into AI are just as powerful. So, for example, going back 6 years ago when people were just using it to make their slides, it can make your slides beautiful. But if you didn't have a really like core point or narrative, and you didn't really know what you're talking about, it wasn't going to help you there. It was just going to make
Yeah.
it look like a designer slapped some really slick, like polishing on your words. I'm finding that a lot of brands are struggling with that today too, in terms of it is such a powerful producer and they can create so much volume that I'm seeing two struggles emerge in the marketing space, which is one, the lack of clarity going into AI means there's going to be a lack of clarity coming out. So
Mhm.
AI can only do so much with what you give it. And also, it is trained to look at themes and trends. And so if you're giving it really general stuff, it's going to give you really general stuff. Or if you don't know who you are as a brand, it's going to define that for you and tell you. And you're going to say, okay, let's run with it. The other challenge I see that brands have is we are now able to produce so much. And, going back to the challenge around strategy and having some of those difficult conversations of, are we talking to the right people? Are we playing in the right spaces? Having worked in agencies, having worked in in-house agencies, having worked with clients on the brand side, marketing is a never-ending project loop. Like, it is deadline after deadline after deadline. And it's really easy to keep your head down and say, okay, we need to get this campaign out. We got this out. We've trafficked this out. That's running. This is trafficked out. We got this to production, all those things. And you never come up for enough air to say, okay, are we still on the right track? And what's really happening is consumer behavior and trends and habits are shifting around us all the time, all the time.
Yep.
And so if we don't come up for air and we don't think about what's right for our brand, what's right, what's not, you're going to end up going in a million and one directions, because you can now with AI, but that doesn't mean all that time and money spent is worthwhile. What are the 2 to 3 things that really matter for your audience or your goals? So to me, I see this lack of clarity and then this volume overload as kind of masking some of what brands really need to be focusing on in order to win in this space and how to harness AI as a tool. So I know that's a long-winded way of saying I'm a huge fan of it. I just think that more teams need to know how to use it effectively and as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. One of our previous guests defined using AI as strapping a jetpack on and just going in one direction, right? So if you're not defining what that direction is to pinpoint accuracy, and then you're implementing all these tools that let you roll out, 5 times as much content or do a million other things much quicker, you're going to find yourself in a month, if your targeting isn't right, way down the road and having to unspin a lot of work that you've already done. So that's a very it's a very poignant point, is that you really need to make sure that what you're doing is correct, because otherwise you're going to find yourself way down the wrong path. So when it comes to AI, what does human-centered AI use look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think with the way that I like to use it in my work, and I like to coach my clients and the brand teams that I work with on, is remember that at the end of the day, everything still starts with your customer. So whether or not we had AI as a tool, your brand is solving a problem for someone. And our gut reaction is oftentimes to say, we as businesses and brands come at it as, I need to sell more, or I want more people reading my newsletter, or I want more people following me on YouTube, or I want. And what I really work with clients on shifting is, you want something, but it's because you serve this audience. What's the problem you serve? Let's start there. So let's take an example of, I'm going to say a wealth manager, right? Let's do professional service based, and say they're a high net wealth manager. In that example, the question isn't how do we get more clients? It's what are high net worth multi-generational families struggling with? Who are they going to? What channels are they going to? What questions are they asking? Let's meet them there. So when you think about using AI, it's less about typing in, hey, I need an email campaign and I need to sell XYZ. It's using it for market research and to unearth what is really going on and how are people actually searching and surfacing for the type of problem that I solve, and then using that to inform any work that goes through. So I think too, we've all fallen into the trap where, say you've done the work to know your audience and you write a creative brief and you upload it into Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity and any of those. And you output something and it tells you something in a different way than you're used to. And you're like, wow, that sounds really good. And then maybe you like type an email or you do a campaign And then you go back to it a week later and you're like, wait, what was I thinking? Like, I don't. So then the other human side of it is taking any of the outputs and saying, okay, is this what we sound like? Is this in line with how we talk to our customers? Let's go back to our ideal persona. Would they be talking this way? Would they be using these words? Is that what they expect of us? Does this differentiate us from any competitors out there? And so, still understanding that we're using AI as a tool to expedite our work, but that at the end of the day, our job is still connect to another human being. And so we need to make sure that anything we're putting into that and anything that's coming out of that, we're evaluating from a, would I say this to someone over coffee or over a drink? Because that's really what makes people act and sell and buy and trust. And so that human use is, don't forget you have to do your homework and make sure that you're auditing anything when it comes out. That would I say that to a friend or a customer if they were on the line with me?
That is absolutely spot on. And this is something, I'll go into a little bit about what we do at NextNet. But
Yeah.
we've built an AI search trafficking and influencing tool. And one thing that we've noticed from a lot of our competitors is that they use AI to generate the prompts for their research for clients. So a client will go in, they'll put their domain in, and it will use AI to generate a bunch of prompts and then track how they appear in AI search based on that. When you drill down into the actual prompts, though, it's not the way people talk at all. It's like, give me an example of a mid-Atlantic or mid-market, sized workout studio that is present in the following geographics. It's like nobody's going to prompt that into ChatGPT. They're going to be like, find me a local, yoga studio,
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see, and that's something that we've had to work through on our end because obviously like with anything, AI will default to bad habits like that. So we have to go through and give the client the option to enter custom prompts, so they can go through and they can say this is a prompt that would drive high intent sales, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or this is a prompt where we feel like we can present our brand properly, and that's a big part of it. And to another point that you had about kind of using it for market research and how AI can misrepresent brands, we see that a lot too, and that's some of our biggest customers are brands that have to make sure that they are being properly represented by AI.
Mm-hmm.
So AI search will go and it will pull from 12 different sources or more, and if those sources are properly citing your brand, that can be damaging to your brand image, that can be damaging to sales. But in cases like pharmaceuticals or even retailers that sell over the counter medicine like CVS or Walgreens, let's say, that can be like potentially a big problem that can cause litigation. If they're misrepresenting how medicine should be used, that can have a real human impact, and that can have real that can open brands to legal issues. So it's
Absolutely.
all this is to say, very important to make sure that AI represents your brand properly, and that you are using AI in a way to help support that, and not necessarily say like just build this, go on, but doing that cross checking, like what you said. A week later, you went back and you're like, what was I thinking? Like that sounded cool in the moment, but like that's not how people talk.
Mm-hmm.
That's so super important.
And one other comment on that, I really like to use, not like, obviously, I do a lot of one on one interviews with prospects and clients or past clients of the brands that I work with. We do surveys. One of the things I'm really cognizant of, and in all the years I've worked in advertising and marketing, people will say one thing in an interview or a focus group in a survey, but then they actually act differently, right, in market. And I think that there's an element of, wariness around that. I think AI can misrepresent your audience to some extent too. But one of
Yeah.
the ways that I really like to get past that is, and you can use this in any industry, Reddit, threads, I think those are a gold mine for market
Yeah.
research.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes I'll use those and then use that as prompts for AI to dig a little bit deeper, or ask AI to surface them so that I can review like more summaries and get more relevant like voice of customer, but it's so interesting to go in there and to understand, what are they saying about my brand? More importantly, what are they saying about competitors, not even my brand? What
Yep.
are the words they use? Where are they happy? Where are they not? Where in the customer journey are we falling short? And then use that as inputs in AI for thinking, for
Mm-hmm.
strategizing, for helping you identify themes. So I share that because, Reddit threads, Yelp reviews, to whatever extent that people are still leveraging those to some extent. If you're a product based, Amazon.com reviews, all of those are gold. Go there. That is the cheapest, fastest way to get market research on what people actually care about.
Yeah, and that's so on the point. And a lot of those are being referenced by AI
Yep.
search anyways, right? So if you need to do that market research and to tie it into the competitor aspect, that's, from what we do, that's one of the biggest, most used portions of the app we generated is that competitor research. So tracking how they're appearing in AI search, tracking how people are talking about them, tracking what's working for them, how they position themselves, and using that as a way to say, what can we replicate? Where can we differentiate to stand out amongst that target audience is so important. And I think that's spot on. So we talk about a lot so far about things that AI can replicate or help with. What are some things that AI can never really replicate? And we kind of touched on this a little bit with the strategy side and digging into what it's good at, what it's not good at. But at a high level, what are some things in marketing or business that you feel like AI will just can't do?
Yeah. So I believe that there is an intuitiveness to knowing your customer, that so sales representatives will oftentimes say this more so than marketing teams, but they'll sit down over dinner with a prospective client or customer, say it's B2B, or say it is, sales representatives on a retail floor. They get to see and understand their customer in a way that words on a page never can, right? There's this
Mm-hmm.
like exchange of energy and feeling. So I don't think it can replicate that. So that said, AI has its role, and then continuing to have your brand have real life interactions with your customer, I think that's irreplaceable, and both are needed, right? There's a place for both. The second thing that I think that AI can't replace, and this is something I've been having a lot of conversations with my clients about, and then just also colleagues and experts in the industry about, is judgment and discernment and taste. Right? There's an element of taste that comes with building a brand, and like that people will gravitate towards. I think that that's a human element that we can never fully replace, because again, it's a visceral feeling, it's an intuitive reaction that you have, either as a marketer being like, that's it, I know my audience, that's it, or the person on the other side that has the buying power that's like, ooh, I want this one instead of that one. Like they are judging a book by its cover, by its reviews, by its features, whatever it is. It's a judgment call on what does your consumer connect with. The reason I've been talking about this with a lot of people is we've been talking about how is AI, so many people are talking about AI is replacing marketing jobs. And I would argue, yes, it's replacing some. It's also creating the job of needing to really understand your customer and your brand and having that judgment, discernment, and taste. And something we've been talking about is, what does that mean for the people that are just entering marketing and advertising and communications as a job? Because typically those are skills that you've developed
Mm-hmm.
10, 15 years in, you're more senior. So how do we start equipping younger teams with those skills that we're going to be requiring of them? If they're running our AI employees, if they're managing them, they need those senior level skills. So how do we start training them on those, not just how to use the AI technology? Because most of them are better at using the AI technology than, like, I'm 41, right? So
Yeah.
my 8-year-old came home the first day of 8th grade and was like, I just built Google Slides with text to talk. And I was like, well, you're leaps and bounds ahead of where I was in 3rd grade, right? So how do we start then giving them the opportunities for some of these really relational skills that they're going to need for brands to succeed, is something that I think is a really interesting conversation right now.
Yeah, and that's mirrored across industries as well. I was
Mm-hmm.
speaking with a guest a few weeks ago who they do cybersecurity, and it's all tied around the AI side and all that. and they were seeing a similar problem with the entry level jobs are in a lot of cases being automated out on the engineering side, but then they still have a heavy reliance on senior engineers to be able to edit and make sure all of that fits in the current ecosystem, to track all of that, to make sure, everything is, and I'm no engineer, but to make sure everything is, kind of working properly. So how do you bridge that gap between these jobs are few and far between at the junior level, but they are so important at the senior level
Mhm.
with the new kind of tech stack? And that's, a similar issue. Like we need to make sure on the marketing side that people coming in and, I lead a department that oversees marketing for a couple brands. And we've done internships in the past. We hire fresh out of college. Like we just hired a designer. And one of the big things is let's, make sure that they, one, have the tools they need to succeed. That we teach them a lot of what needs to be learned in this space, right? Like so much of marketing is intuitive. It's things you've learned, it's gut instinct, and a lot of that is drawn upon skills that you've grown over time. So being able to do that and being able to kind of teach that next generation of marketers is incredibly important to me. I take it pretty seriously, and I feel like AI can help. I think AI is a very, very useful hammer. Um, I don't think it's a very useful arm to swing the hammer,
Yeah,
so to speak. So
that's a great point.
yeah, there was one other thing that you had said that really resonated with me, and that was on the topic of the sales side, right? Like that human connection that's a through line we hear from a lot of our guests, and something from a marketing standpoint, we tend to deal a lot more with data than
Mhm.
sales does, and they tend to deal a lot more with the human connection and that creativity side of it. So something that we do, we transcribe all our calls like most businesses do,
Mhm.
and we've created a flow to feed that into AI to find commonalities, so common themes, whether it's we're presenting a specific product line and we're getting a lot of budget objections, and that might tell us that we are priced too high relative to the market or whatever it is, right? So we use it to kind of find those through lines, but I still make time weekly to meet with sales team members to talk about what are you saying? What's your gut instinct? Tell me about the connections you're making. Tell me what our market is doing, right? Like, because it's hard for, we don't run focus groups here. So a lot of what we do is getting with them and saying, like, walk me through your last sale. Tell
Right.
me what the
That seems
vibe
really
is.
important. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think there's uses, but again, that human connection part of it's so important that just finding a way to keep that and not lose that in the excitement and the almost like gold rush esque feeling of AI right now of like how can we use it for everything? We all of our competitors are using it. We have to use it to get ahead, and making sure that you don't lose the things that are important that are making your business relatable is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And piggybacking on that, sales connection and connecting with them. I remember I went to Marketing Profs B2B Forum conference in Boston last November, and I was sitting at the back of the session, just taking it in. And most of the people in the room were in-house marketers. And they were talking about the challenge between, us on the marketing side have all this information and data, and then we have the sales team, but we're never really communicating, and they say they need this, but our data tells us that we need this, and this like gel. And something that I've worked with a lot of teams on is that people think marketing is a department, and it's actually a mindset. So when we start to take the labels off of marketing versus sales, we start to realize we're actually all on the same team and we're all trying to do the same thing, right? And so when we break down those barriers and think about marketing as a mindset, and to your point, like let's focus on the main thing. The main thing is not AI. The main thing is how do we build a successful, profitable business? If
Mm-hmm.
AI is part of that, how do we use AI to do that? In 10 years, there's going to be something else we're talking about, whether it's embedded in AI or something else. So if we can't keep that eye on the prize, and if sales and marketing can say, okay, our overall objective is to get more people to be aware of us, to consider us, to convert with us, and then be an advocate of us, to refer us to other people. Can we sit down and have that conversation? Less of brochure versus social media channel versus whatever, and instead talk about it in the customer journey. Okay, this is how they're finding out about us. When they're finding out about us, this is what makes them pick up the phone or submit a form online. When I jump on the phone with them, these are their biggest objections. Okay, marketing team, what are those objections? How do we address those objections? And how do we equip your sales team to be not more uniform, but more consistent quality and effective in overcoming those objectives? And start thinking about marketing as you have this whole customer journey. How can all members of the team, it could be operations, it could be finance, it could be anyone, of at the end of the day, there's a human, even if you're B2B, you're still selling human to human, moving through the journey. How do we make their experience as seamless and as successful as possible? It requires us knowing them better than they know themselves and thinking ahead and making sure that we've paved a really good path for them. So when people, talk about sales versus marketing, part of me wants to be like, you're all working towards the same thing. Sit down and brainstorm and have a conversation and just talk about the journey and where you guys can support each other.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And now we've talked a lot about how to use AI and the dangers of over reliance on it, which I think can be very, very clear. I think with that, I think people would love to hear how you personally use AI to
Mm-hmm.
enhance your own thinking or creativity
Yep.
or productivity.
Yeah. I think it's both. And I've struggled with this in that I had this, maybe it was ego, but like ethical, moral, like, well, am I cheating if I use AI for certain things?
Oh,
So,
I absolutely 100%. The first time I really started implementing, I'm like, "Ah, like this
yeah.
feels wrong. It feels like I should be doing this work
And
myself.
it's so funny. I on LinkedIn, I'll go and I'll read these posts, and this isn't necessarily to knock anyone, but it's also like, just remember we're all using it and we're all human. Like, you literally can't execute a Google search right now without the AI search results coming up. Like, we're all using it
Oh,
to
trust
some
me, I
extent,
know
right?
it. Yeah.
There's so much happening behind the scenes, even if you don't pull up Claude
Mhm.
every day, right? But
Yeah.
I do pull up Claude every day. And I'll go on LinkedIn and there'll be all these posts about how, like, fine, leave me behind. I don't need AI. I'm good without it. But then I read the post and I'm like, this was clearly written by AI. Like, you can tell
Yeah.
with like the short sentences and the periods. So the way that I use it, and this has been, I think for everyone it's different, and for every team and brand it's different. No brands I've worked with are using it exactly the same, because it all depends on them and their culture and their goals. The way that I use it is, I use it to escape blank page syndrome. So oftentimes I have a lot of ideas and structure, and I
Hmm.
use it almost as a junior team member to, I'm going to give you the inputs. I need you to sort it and give me a first draft back, because it's a lot quicker for me to work on, right?
Yeah,
That's number
absolutely.
one. Number two, I use it for research all the time. I've used it. So I'm actually in the very early stages of writing a book, and I'm not using it for writing. What I'm using it for is research and resurfacing case studies that I didn't know about that I can then go research. And I pull up the HBR reviews on it, and I go to their old websites, and I'm doing all that research, but I couldn't unearth that through Google. I had to use it through AI, because I was giving it a really specific prompt of, can you give me a second? I have one example of this. Can you give me a second example of that? I definitely use it for communications if I'm struggling to communicate effectively. And I don't think anyone should be ashamed of that. I'll use it to say, how can I be a little more pointed about this in an
Hmm.
email? And then I soften it with my own touch. What I will tell you is, I use it all the time for a first draft with my own inputs. Never, ever, ever have I ever taken anything from AI and sent it without having to rewrite it a bunch of times myself,
Yeah.
or giving it different prompts. So
Hmm.
I see it as a colleague. I do not see it as a team member that does the work for me. I see it as a thinking partner, as a drafting partner. And really, what it helps with is, it helps drafts go quicker. But I can tell you, I've never, ever, ever sent anything out exactly as is, because oftentimes I find errors, and other times I'm like, oh, wait, this doesn't work. And I go, but I had enough to go at least rewrite it myself.
Hmm.
So I use it for a lot of that. I also just use it for when I'm trying to understand a new best practice about something. So, for example, I follow Subscribe to Marketing Against the Grain, HubSpot's, you know, uh, podcast and newsletter, and they are coming out all the time with new things that you can do in AI. I'll go have a conversation with AI about how it works so that I understand, wait, what's the actual like mechanism behind this? Because I care about the mechanism, because ultimately that's what I have to understand
Yeah,
as a strategist. And so it helps me just learn some of the more technical things that I don't. So it's like having, taking a quick 101 course on something. So those are the ways I use it. I also use it in my personal life all the time. I don't upload any personal information I wouldn't share, but I mentioned earlier, like I'm a competitive Irish step dancer. I'm competing at nationals in Orlando in 17 days. And it's been my training partner of like, should I get one more round of sprints in? And I'll be like, nope, nope, go to bed for the night. And I'm like, okay, that's what I needed. I needed someone to have that logic that I didn't have in that moment. So huge proponent. I also think don't assume that it does everything better than you do.
that's awesome. Also, I love the fact that you are a competitive Irish dancer. Like that is.
Geriatric competitive Irish dancer.
Well, I don't know if 40 counts as geriatric, and if it does, I'm terrified because I'm almost there. But yeah, I mean that's super interesting. And I was looking at the calendar. I was going to. I live in Florida. I
Okay.
was going to take the kids to Disney at some point in the near future, but I don't think I would be there while you were at your dance competition, or I'd stop by and say hi. Um, but yeah, that's really poignant. A lot of things that you've been saying are things that have been echoed by previous guests or topics that we've come up with while we've been going through. It's things that
Mhm.
we've seen our audiences talk about as well. It's super important not to lose the forest for the trees, or the trees for the forest. I always forget that
Mhm.
thing, but not to lose sight of what's most important because of AI, right? And when you're using it as a way to help you write or to help you get over that blank page syndrome, just using it as a way to trigger the creativity and trigger the thought process is so much more impactful than necessarily being like spit out 10 pages of whatever you can scrape and aggregate together from different data sources, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
So let's predict the future here for a minute, which we like to do with our guests. So let's fast forward like 10 years. What do you think the role between human and AI will look like? How will that interface and interaction be?
Um, I think that I have two answers to this. I have what I think will happen and what I want to happen. Um, what I want to happen is that we continue to use it as a tool to make our lives easier, to free up mental space, and that eliminate that decision fatigue of really saving our horsepower, our mental power for like what really matters. What I see happening is, I mean, it's already everywhere. It's going to continue to be everywhere, whether we like it or
Yep.
not, whether for moral, ethical, environmental reasons. I have concerns about all of those things. I also think this is a force that can't be stopped. What I think will happen is that it's going to become a peer. It is going to replace a lot of the current day skills that we have, that our kids are learning, that junior team members have, that we're teaching in school. That said, if I layer in one more thing of what I hope is happening is, I hope what this opens up is it reinforces our human powers. So where AI takes over production in the same way a labor force once did, right? Like, centuries ago, can we lean into what makes us uniquely human and that AI can't replace? And can we appreciate that and find that in each other, in brands? You see brands right now starting to actually label whether or not their campaigns are using AI content, because some are getting backlash if they do. Um, what's interesting to me is I don't think 10 years from now that's going to matter so much of, hey, did you use AI or not? As much as it is, do you really understand me? Are you making my life
Mhm.
better? And are we leaving time for the human things, both as individuals, but as brands as well? I do think that AI is going to be a mainstay of any marketing team. I think it's going to be table stakes. I
Yep.
think you will absolutely have AI employees. I think the brands that are going to win are the brands that know when to use it, and it's not all the time. And they're going to be the ones who have the team behind it that really understand what makes people tick and what makes them different and can train and manage those AI employees. So it's here to stay, it's part of our life. I think what I see happening versus what I'd like to happen is I see it taking over lots and it's moving so quickly, we don't really know how to use it to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
What I would like to happen is for us to actually be able to get it to a point where it's enriching our lives as opposed to automating or diluting our lives
Mhm.
and our brands too. So that's my thought on that. Time shall see, time shall tell where we end up. But
I think that's spot on, and I think there was a recent example with I believe it was McDonald's where they use AI and it had massive backlash, right? I think that there is going to be a cultural solidification around acceptable uses, not acceptable uses,
mhm.
right? I You can't see it. I've got guitars and amplifiers, and
Oh,
I like to pretend I'm a musician.
that's awesome.
AI in music, absolutely not. AI in any creative art kills me, right? Like I hate to see it in design. I hate to see it in music, and I think a lot of people feel similarly, right?
Mhm.
There's that kind of cultural solidification happening behind like don't take the human element out of art. Like that's a very important thing. So I think that we'll see that, and I think that that's something that brands will have to be cognizant of in the future. Running an ad campaign like McDonald's so recently did that, was heavily AI generated, had that big backlash. Well, what's the opposite of that? Running something that has a very deep human connection. I think if you think back to a lot of the Super Bowl ads, Budweiser does
Yep.
some fantastic ads where it's evokes emotion. It has the cool Clydesdales and all of that. And I think that that's going to be so important in the future is not losing sight of what evokes an emotional response in people. And that's
Mhm.
a lot of marketing, right? Especially when it's B2C, consumer focused. A lot of marketing is figuring out how can I evoke a positive response towards our brand and how can I make a connection with a customer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, please go ahead.
No, it's going to say another brand that I noticed doing this is Aerie, the former American Eagle.
Yeah.
So much of their work has been around real models, around body positivity, about being able to trust the brand, about being able to see yourself in the brand. That's another really good example. And I think that also brings up, as we're thinking about evoking a positive emotional response, the generations that are coming up after us, they're very different in what
Mm-hmm.
they are
Yep.
expecting from a brand, and expecting from an exchange of value, expecting in terms of reputation and representation. So I think that also speaks to, when I think of AI, there's that story, right, of like, if you're flying a plane and you shift the plane like 2 degrees, you might end up like X number of 100 miles away or like
Yeah.
1,000 miles away from like your spot. AI is kind of like that, and that's why we need that human element. And where I see it being 10 years from now is if a brand isn't careful now, they might be setting off on one course, but through 100 million little decisions every day, their brand ends up in an entirely different space. And oftentimes you don't notice that till it's too late, right? You're so far from your starting point, or there's been enough backlash, and it's really hard to course correct. So, what I see is the 10 years from now, we still need those humans to make sure that your plane is on track to where it's going in your brand. Otherwise, you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, wow, we have diluted this, or we've lost so much market share, we've lost so much trust, and it's too late at that point. It's too late. It's not just one campaign, it's a million decisions over time that are creating that experience that you need to be really focused on. And so, what I really think brands are doing right now, separate from AI technology, is brands right now, 10 years from now, their actions in AI right now are setting them up for success 5 and 10 years from now. They're
Yeah.
not going to know it in 6 months. They're going to know it in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah, and I think too, even the most benign example of that, you're still going to maybe not alienate your audience or maybe not disconnect, but if you're going off course, you're still going to waste labor. You're going to waste capital on any ad campaigns you're running, anything like that. You're going to have a material, drop in ROI, and that's something that everybody should be concerned about, right?
Mhm.
And I think that that's something across the board that we've seen that, and all the excitement to become more efficient and use AI, that people are losing sight of. And I've seen with clients, I've seen that negative impact that can happen because they're too busy, putting themselves on a rocket powered sled and going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they see that peak, right?
Mhm.
That they get some visibility or exposure, but
Yep.
then their experience doesn't match. And then it's a slow decline. And they're like, but wait, this was working for a while. But then it's like they had enough people come through that they're like, oh, there wasn't legs to stand on there, or we
Yep.
didn't live up to it. And so it's something to be really careful of.
Yeah. We're coming up on time, but I do want to ask you one last question. If you could leave our listeners with one message about humans and AI, what would it be?
Um, One final message about humans with AI, what would it be? It would be to not think, to know that inherently you have value to add in addition to the machine. So it's really easy to think that the machine is smarter than you and to train yourself that it has more answers. What I would try to remind anyone, whether you're a marketer or not, engaging with this incredible tool is that what I would say over dinner to my spouse or partner? Would I say that to my colleague? Does this make sense? And does it feel inherently right? Trust your gut more than the machine. Always trust your gut, because your gut is what your clients, your customers, your centers of influence are making their decisions with still.
Yeah, I think that is spot on. And thank you very much, Courtney, for taking the time to join us today. Uh, I really enjoyed this conversation. It's reaffirmed a lot of the things that we've been hearing. It, kind of gave us some unique insights into how we can merge the human with AI in the kind of crazy times that we live in right now. Before we close out, I always like to give our guests a chance to talk about where people can find them. So to kind of promote whatever they're working on, things like that. So Courtney, please feel free. Tell us about all the cool things. I would love to hear more about the book you're planning on writing, but please feel free to shout out whatever you'd like.
Yes, absolutely. So the book I'm writing is actually Marketing as a Mindset. It's in progress. I do not have a formal publication date, but it will be coming out. And it's really speaking to what I echoed earlier in our conversation, which is that marketing is not a department, it's really a mindset. And once folks make that mindset shift, marketing becomes more simple, more successful, and more sustainable, whether you're a small business or a big business. In the meantime, you can find me at growthmindedstrategy.com. And I actually I have a guide, which is, kind of like an audit for brands, that there are 5 common gaps that I've seen in people's brand and marketing strategy that prevent them from really being able to harness AI as a powerful tool. So we talked about, if you're not clear going into AI, what you're going to get out is just a lot of noise or chaos. And so, in order to do a gut check to say, am I getting the most out of it? I help brands kind of identify what are those 5 gaps they might want to pay a little bit more attention to. So your listeners can grab that at growthmindedstrategy.com/guide. And then I'm also on LinkedIn if anyone wants to connect and chat. But Tristan, I love the work that your team is doing. I love what you're doing with the crawl, and I really appreciate you having me on for this conversation. This topic of AI and marketing, that's exactly what it is. It's a conversation. It's not static, it's dynamic. In a week, it'll probably change again, but we're all doing the best we can as of right now in what we
Yeah.
know.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And thank you, everybody that listens, all of our listeners. It means a lot to us that you spend time with us, kind of listening in. So if you like this episode, please make sure to hit follow, leave a review, and more importantly, please comment on either our social or whatever streaming platform you're listening on, topics that you would like for us to cover. It really helps us in finding guests that will be interesting to you guys. And it means a lot to kind of get that positive feedback from you all. So thank you again so much, Courtney. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you.